Like one, pirate change denier. You may remember hearing about Rachel and Paul Chandler a few years back. They're a British couple who were spending their retirement sailing around the world. But in October 2009, in the middle of the night, a band of Somali pirates boarded their boat with guns and kidnapped them for ransom. They were held for months in the Somali bush, where they were threatened and fed a steady diet of goat liver. Back in England, Rachel's brother, a guy named Stephen Collett, was negotiating with the pirates. He spent 8 months trying to work out a deal, mostly with a pirate called Ali. They finally came to an agreement, $440,000 for Rachel and Paul's freedom. A contract was written up and signed and faxed to Ali's office in Somalia. Some pirates have offices and fax machines. And then the day before Rachel and Paul were scheduled to be released, the pirates let Stephen talk directly to Paul.
We have made arrangements, Paul, to deliver the money to the pirates by plane to a town called Adado tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Yeah. 11 o'clock?
Yes. Now, if the plane cannot land again to collect you, then you will stay with a Mr Mohammed Aden tomorrow night in Adado.
Mohammed Aden?
Yes, in Adado. Now, Mohammed Aden is the district governor who lives in Adado, and he is not a pirate. I repeat, he is not a pirate.
Okay, yes, that's good.
He is working on our side. He is a good man, and you can trust him.
Mohammed Aden, the guy Stephen mentions, he was the governor of a region in Somalia where Rachel and Paul were held. He's actually American, Somali American. He was born in Mogadishu, but spent half his life in Minneapolis. Most people call him by his nickname, T.I. And when Stephen says,
he is not a pirate. I repeat, he is not a pirate.
That's actually the question of this story. T.I. took a public stand against piracy, worked to end piracy in his area. But right now he's locked up in a Belgian prison. He was arrested for piracy and for criminal organization. He denies the charges, though, of course, as you just heard, denying you're a pirate is an old tradition in pirating. So, is he innocent? Is he a pirate? Is he colluding with pirates? And if he is, how does a guy who comes all the way from America with the best of intentions, hoping to do the right things, end up in this situation? One of our producers, Dana Chivas, looked into it.
T.I. used to be just another boring dad in Minnesota. In 2008, he was finishing a master's degree in public administration at Minnesota State and starting a small health services company. He lived in a 3-bedroom condo in the suburbs of Minneapolis with his wife Shamso and their 5 sons. He was a regular Walmart-shopping, football-loving, homework-checking father. He was also active in the Somali community in Minneapolis, and he did this thing that do-gooder expats do. He raised money from other members of his clan to send back home. He tried to improve things back in Somalia. Clans run Somalia. There's no powerful central government there. And T.I.'s clan is made up of hundreds of thousands of people. In 2008, the clan was trying to restore order to the part of the country they're from, a region called Ximan Xeeb, a 5,000 square mile patch of sand that hadn't had a functioning government since the early 90s. A place with no running water, rife with bandits and warlords, where camel herders wandered the desert and pirates plundered the seas, where you couldn't drive from one town to another because the warring tribes wouldn't allow it. So members of the clan from all over the world gathered in Dubai to come up with a plan to create a government there. T.I. went to that conference. He says he was actually picked to run the meeting, and he did such a good job, the clan elders drafted him to be part of a small team that would actually move to Ximan Xeeb for 3 months, write a constitution, and get a government started. He's a guy who has trouble saying no, so he flew to Africa, directly, from the conference. So wait, they didn't let you go back? You couldn't go back to Minneapolis?
No.
You went straight to Somalia.
Because they afraid if we go back to our homes, we never come back.
Oh my God.
Yes. So in a way, it was a setup.
Yeah, it was a setup. You were conscripted.
Yes.
At the end of those 3 months, he'd done such a good job that the local elders asked him to stay and run the place for a few years. He didn't want to do it, lobbied against it for a week. But his friends finally sat him down and said, "You have no choice. If any of us had been asked, we'd do it." So he agreed.
the day they appointed me, that was my scariest day in my entire life.
He's saying it was the scariest day in his entire life. That's T.I. talking to me in January. He's calling me from the prison in Belgium, so it's a little hard to hear.
I scared like a little girl.
Do you remember calling Shamso and telling her this news?
Actually, what I did is I could not face, to be honest with you. She's the what's called the boss. She's the one who wears the pants in the house.
He says it was hard to bring himself to tell his wife, so he asked his friends to call her, figuring she couldn't say no to them.
I was a coward. I didn't have the balls.
At first, he told his wife, Shamso, he'd only be gone a few months. But now he had to explain to her, well, his friends did actually, that he was going to stay in Somalia for a few years, leaving her with 5 boys to manage back in Minneapolis, while he lived in the lawless country they'd both fled years ago. When I asked him what his goals were in Somalia, he said he didn't want to die.
First of all, my dream was not to die here.
Yeah.
Not to die there. But work-wise, my dream was, to make this region the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
To make safe, to make new buildings, good buildings, roads, lights, a lot of people working, and there's a lot of income, and, but it was a dream.
I've been talking to T.I. since December when I visited him at the prison in Belgium. It's a massive and foreboding place with a moat for some reason. T.I. doesn't look like a pirate. He looks like a professor. He's 6 feet tall and a little chubby. He's 44 years old with a goatee that's starting to gray. And since we met, he's been calling me from a phone in the lounge area of his cell block. We've spent hours talking about his work in Somalia and his legal case. There's always a TV on in the background, so it can get a little tough to hear. Hello?
Hey, Donna, good evening.
Hey, T.I., how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I like talking to T.I. He's smart and he has a good sense of humor. At one point, we were trying to figure out how much these phone calls cost. He thought they were really expensive.
$5.75.
So $5.75 a minute is the best price.
Oh my God! And it's ripoff. It's like calling Antarctica or somewhere no man's land.
They're accusing you of piracy.
Yeah, look at that. Touche.
Turns out, by the way, T.I. overestimated. The calls were much less than that, only about $1 and change. Overestimating might be a character flaw of his, as you'll hear. So here's the story he told me, about how he went into Somalia full of hope and good intentions and ended up in the clink in Belgium. T.I.'s first priority as governor of Ximan Xeeb was to hire police and set up a court system. He knew he couldn't make any progress unless there was some security in the area. He hired police and paid them $50 a month. He told me he didn't pay his small administrative staff a salary at first because he wanted to save the little money he had for the police and the judges, make sure they'd stay on his side. T.I. was setting up a government from scratch, so it's not like everyone just accepted the new order. His first month there, the court heard a land dispute. 2 men claimed to own the same piece of property, and the guy who lost the case was pretty unhappy about it. So he and a bunch of relatives with guns surrounded the disputed land. T.I.'s soldiers showed up, and the occupiers...
They opened fire, and one of my soldiers died.
T.I.'s men ended up killing 3 of the occupiers.
I'm not proud of killing people, but that was actually the turning point of the respect that we get. That's the day the administration became a real administration.
After that incident, people started to respect T.I.'s new administration. He had authority now. He was writing laws and he was able to enforce them. But it was still pretty scary.
Every morning when you wake up, you're thinking about how I'm going to die today. If I'm going to die, am I going to die with bullet? Am I going to die with car bomb? Am I going to die with suicide? Am I going to die with my staff killing me? You see, so that seriously, and that's the environment you're working on.
What I do daily basis is to solve the problems for the people, whether it's lack of foodness, water.
That's T.I. talking to a New York Times video journalist in 2009, a year after he started the government.
In other works, you can measure your success, but this is very easy to measure for the success. You can see the people's eyes that you help them, and you feel good. You feel good about that.
That interview happened because a New York Times reporter named Jeffrey Gettleman caught wind of the changes happening in Adado, and he decided to go see for himself. To get there, he had to hire one militia for the start of the journey, who handed him off to a second militia, who drove him the rest of the way into Adado.
So as we pulled in, we saw lots of new construction, lots of houses with brand new shiny metal roofs, a relatively new school, new stores, lights. It was like an oasis of development in the middle of a very neglected, remote area.
Did you feel safer there than you did in your other trips around Somalia?
I felt pretty safe there, and maybe that was totally ridiculous. But I felt safe there because I trusted TA, and he had control. Like, I had been in Somalia enough, I could kind of tell who was the real deal and who was a pretender, and he seemed like the real deal.
But T.I. still had one major problem to tackle: pirates.
They were more powerful than anyone else at that time.
The years that T.I. was governor, 2008 until 2013, that's when the piracy epidemic was raging in Somalia. In fact, piracy was so pervasive that it was basically its own industry, one that cost the world economy billions each year. In 2010, more than 1,000 people were taken hostage at sea. Nobody, not the Somali federal government or rich Western nations, had been able to roust them. T.I.'s region was home to one of the most notorious pirate towns in Somalia, a place called Haradera. T.I. set up local governments in other towns in the region, but when he went to Haradera, the elders there told him not to bother. The pirates controlled everything. They'd even set up a pirate stock exchange there in a building where anyone could go and buy shares in a pirate venture. They had more guns and more men and more money than T.I. did, and they weren't going to listen to him. In April of 2009, T.I. says he met with the president of Somalia and told him he needed help fighting the pirates. Luckily, the president had worked to eradicate piracy himself in the same area in 2006, and it had worked for a little while. The president knew someone who could help T.I., a guy called Mohammed Aden Tiiceey. He goes by the nickname Afweyne, which means big mouth. He was a Somali businessman, and also the godfather of modern Somali piracy. Afweyne is the guy who figured out that you could run a piracy business like any other legitimate business, by raising capital from investors and then funding piracy ventures on the high seas. Did you have the thought of, like, why would I hire a guy who's a big pirate to run my anti-piracy campaign?
Actually, at that time he was, to be honest with you, I'm not hiding anything. Mm-hmm. At that time he was a businessman.
So he wasn't hijacking ships.
No. He was based. He have an office in Adab at that time. He's bringing chat.
Chat. Oh, that was his business. Chat is a leaf that gives you a little buzz when you chew it. It's legal in Somalia, and pirates apparently chew the stuff all day long. What was Afweyne, like, as a member of the committee, what was he actually doing?
He knew most of those guys, especially the middleman. He knows a lot.
Most of the middleman pirates.
Yes. Even the kingpins, he knows a lot.
Yeah.
Because most of them used to work for him.
If this doesn't seem like the greatest idea, to hire one of the most notorious pirates to help you end piracy, T.I. said he didn't have much of a choice. And actually, Afweyne turned out to be really helpful. This was their plan. Step 1. Pirate shaming. Convince the local imams to start teaching people that piracy is forbidden in the Quran, so the pirates become ostracized. Step 2. Create an economic incentive. Give the pirates other job opportunities that don't require hijacking and kidnapping, like maybe create a market for fish. Step 3. Pirate rehabilitation. When they caught the lower-level pirates, the foot soldiers, T.I. sent them to a rehabilitation camp, taught them new job skills, including how to read and write. And with the pirate bosses, the kingpins, T.I. had one especially attractive incentive to offer them to get them to quit the business: immunity. which T.I. points out only applies to the Somali government. It doesn't mean the U.S. or Britain or Belgium, for instance, couldn't capture them later. But he doesn't mention that part to them.
You think I never lie to them? I lie. I tell them many lies.
You tell the pirates many lies. The kingpins many lies.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Huh.
I tell them many lies to get them.
To get them out of hiding.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You have to lie because this is your livelihood.
Right.
You want this to finish. You want this be your legacy.
By 2012, pirate attacks on big ships had effectively stopped in all of Somalia. A lot of that had to do with stuff that was happening on the water. Foreign navies were patrolling the ocean, and maritime companies started putting armed security on their boats and sailing faster and further from the coast. And in Ximan Xeeb, in December 2012, T.I. held a press conference where he sat on stage as a bunch of local pirates publicly retired in front of cameras and reporters in return for immunity. It was a huge moment for him.
It was a good legacy. It was the biggest thing I ever done, other than I introduced the region peace, order, and good governance. Mm-hmm. So that's something.
A few months after the press conference, T.I. got an email out of the blue from a guy called Eunice Collier, who was with a film company in Europe. He said they wanted to make a documentary about piracy, and they wanted to talk to T.I. about how he dealt with the pirates in Ximan Xeeb. T.I. agreed to meet in New York for a few days to talk about the project. The filmmakers put him up at the Trump International Hotel and Tower right on Central Park. The first morning there, Eunice shows up. T.I. noticed he was a little hyper, and his clothes weren't as nice as he was expecting. So T.I. teases him.
You don't dress like you are in a film company.
Right. It wasn't fancy.
Usually, it wasn't fancy. I can see that. So I talk about that. Yeah. You don't dress like you are working in
film.
I gotta go.
Oh, okay.
Monday I will call you.
Okay.
Have a good trip, okay?
Thanks so much, T.I. Have a nice, I don't know, I guess have a nice weekend. You're in prison, but...
You can say that.
Okay. Sometimes I forget he's in prison. Anyway, we got back to the story a few days later. T.I. says Eunice's boss was there also. They spent 3 days together, took T.I. on a helicopter ride around Manhattan and out for nice meals. Eventually, Eunice got down to business. He wanted T.I. and Afweyne to be consultants on the film.
He says that this is what we want. We're going to show you a script, and he says that we're going to pay you, your time.
Mm. How much were they going to pay you?
They said we're going to pay, if the project is finished and everything finished, $200,000 each.
Oh, my God. That's so much money.
Yes. Yeah, $200,000 each. We're going to pay that.
T.I. agreed. They had one last meal at the Grand Central Oyster Bar. The filmmakers asked T.I. to convince Afweyne to help too. And once Afweyne was on board, they'd all meet in Europe for a week where they'd get to work. 7 days in Europe, $200,000 each to consult on a film about pirates. Pirates. Who could refuse? T.I. and Afweyne landed in Brussels a month later. When they showed their passports, there was something wrong with Afweyne's visa. They were escorted to airport police.
My gut feeling tells me that I'm in trouble.
Really?
Whatever it is, yes. So after 1 hour, federal police came. And, he introduced himself. He says, my name is Van Hasla. I'm a federal police, and I'm here to take your freedom away.
It was all a ruse. All of it was fake. Eunice Collier, the meetings in New York, the documentary film about eradicating piracy. It was the Belgian federal police the whole time, an elaborate plan to lure Afweyne to Belgium, where they could arrest him and prosecute him for the hijacking of a Belgian ship called the Pompey. The Pompey was taken in April 2009, which was actually just a few months before Afweyne joined up with T.I. to fight piracy. The Belgians found Afweyne's DNA on a coffee cup in the captain's cabin of the Pompey. They'd used T.I. to get to Afweyne. T.I.'s lawyer says the Belgians weren't after T.I. at all. But in their excitement over catching Afweyne, they got carried away and locked T.I. up too. Did you feel a little like the
the world's worst prank had just been played on you?
I feel like a cheap.
You feel like a what?
Yeah, cheap, very cheap.
Very cheap.
Humiliated.
Yeah.
And very cheap.
Yeah. Tiiceey and Afweyne, the guys who say they put the pirates out of business in Ximan Xeeb, were both charged with piracy. There's pretty strong evidence against Tiiceey. The Belgians are saying that when Tiiceey started working with Afweyne, Afweyne was still hijacking ships, and Tiiceey got wrapped up in Afweyne's criminal organization, would insert himself into the negotiations for hostage releases, and used it to run a little side hustle. He'd demand additional money from the hostages' families, tens of thousands of dollars, for use of the airport at Adado. That's extortion. The Belgians claim he extorted money from the families of hostages in 4 specific piracy cases. One of them is the kidnapping of Rachel and Paul Chandler. That's the recording you heard at the beginning of this story. Rachel's brother Stephen is on the phone with Paul, telling him to trust Tiiceey.
He is a good man, and you can trust him. He is not a pirate. I repeat, he is not a pirate.
But Stephen told me that wasn't how he actually felt about Tiiceey in that moment. In reality,
I was very sceptical of him and thought he was just a greedy little thief, to be honest.
It's This American Life. I'm Ira Glass. Today on our program, I am not a pirate. Stories where people make that claim. Apparently, it's something people say when they aren't a pirate, and also when they are a pirate. We're in the middle of Dana Chivvis' story about Tiiceey, a man who returned to Somalia to try to help out and ended up accused of criminal conspiracy with pirates. And we pick up the story in the middle of a negotiation that Tiiceey was involved in with Stephen Collette, who's trying to arrange for safe passage for his sister and his brother-in-law, Rachel and Paul, who are being held by pirates. Again, here's Dana.
at this point in the negotiation, Stephen had agreed to pay the pirates $440,000 for Rachel and Paul's release. Tiiceey wasn't involved in that part of things, but he'd offered to help Stephen with the logistics of getting Rachel and Paul out of Somalia. Tiiceey wrote an email saying his administration, quote, are not part of the pirates and don't deal and share money, and we are not expecting any, this word is capitalized, any payment from the pirates or Paul and Rachel family. The only support we are offering was humanitarian support and to facilitate Paul and Rachel's safe passage. Stephen needed permission to use the airport in Adado, which, as far as I can tell, is just a dusty landing strip a few miles outside town. As governor, Tiiceey was the only person who could give planes permission to land there. So Stephen called Tiiceey to get that permission.
Thank you for ringing back.
How you doing, sir?
I'm fine.
They talk about logistics, and then Stephen asks,
how much is this going to cost us? Because we've got nothing left.
Listen, I'm not going to charge you anything.
That's very kind.
I'm not going to charge you personally anything, money or anything. I'm doing this as a material. As long as you pay the expenses.
It's kind of hard to hear. Tiiceey says, I'm not going to charge you anything as long as you pay the expenses. 4 days later, when Stephen calls Tiiceey back, there's been a slight hitch in the plan. They were going to get the money to the pirates through a guy in Nairobi, but that fell through. So now they need to deliver the ransom money to the pirates at the Adado airport. Tiiceey doesn't like this. Before, the plane was just coming to pick up Rachel and Paul. But now it's also bringing a huge sack of cash. And he says that creates a big security risk. He's worried people might get violent and steal the money. He'll allow it, but he needs extra security.
So, yes, you can go ahead and bring the money to here, and we secure almost, I arranged about 70 to 100 people, soldiers in the airport area to secure the perimeter and everything. And in that case, so including the fee and everything, it's going to be $21,750.
So, can you repeat that, please?
Okay. This is what I said.
Tiiceey's telling Stephen that he'll arrange for about 70 to 100 soldiers to secure the airport, which will cost Stephen $21,750. Stephen wasn't expecting that.
I don't know. I'm confused about this big cost, Mohammed. You know, you told me many times that you would not take any money. I know it's difficult. The family doesn't have this amount of money to spend. Because we've given everything to...
I'm not taking money when you want, if you find out, this is what I'm doing. This is the landing fee, the extra police that we put it, the expenses. We are not rich like United States or any other countries. We are a small administration. It's beyond our capacity. We have to put a lot of effort in that case.
I fully appreciate it, but we just do not have that amount. We just do not have $20,000.
So what you're telling me is you don't have it. I understand that, but how can I solve it? This is what do you need, the security you need. So what should I do? Tell me. It's your call.
Depending on how you hear this call, they're either in the midst of a bureaucratic stalemate or a small-time extortion.
I'm not negotiating. This is what the minimum that we did.
Yes.
And this is not something goes to the pocket of one person. Believe me, I'm not personally. I'm not getting paid whatsoever for that.
T.I. is saying that the number he gave Stephen, the $21,750, that's the minimum amount needed to cover the expenses for securing the airport. He's not personally getting any of that money. They do some more haggling, and then T.I. says, let me see what I can do. A few minutes later, he calls Stephen back. He's managed to secure a discount.
Okay, this is what it is. I spoke to them. The price was $21,750, and then we take 15% discount. So in that case, it's going to be $18,487.50.
Yeah. We don't have this money. That's the problem. I don't have the money, and it's going to take me a long, long time to get hold of it.
Okay, so this is what you want, Stephen. You want that airplane comes with the money, no security, and then they hand out everything. That's what you want? And then the fight starts in my people, and then almost 50, 70 people died because of this small money and these two people. Is that what you want?
Of course I don't want anyone hurt, Mohammed. Of course I don't.
But Stephen didn't believe that T.I. was worried about security. He thought it was a scam.
He knew he got us. He was in control. It was his airfield, and he could do what he liked. Mm-hmm. We'd spoken to the local pilots, the bush pilots who do sometimes run into these places, and they said the normal fee was about $100.
$100 would be a normal landing fee.
Yes.
And he's asking for $21,750.
That's right. Then he gave us a discount for cash.
Yeah, he did. The UN released a report that has a lengthy section on T.I. and Afweyne and their alleged criminal activity. It mirrors the Belgian case closely, and in it there's a sheet from the Ximan Xeeb Regional Administration. It's signed by T.I., and it outlines fees for airlines using the Adado airport. The costs are $5 per ticket, $1 per sack of outgoing goods, $50 security fee for a 50-seat flight. Of course, those prices were for normal flights in and out of Adado carrying regular passengers and bags of chat, not 2 British hostages and nearly $500,000. But still, given those prices, $21,750 seems a bit extravagant, even with the extra security. I went around and around with T.I. about this fee and what it was spent on, and it never added up. Maybe he was pocketing part of the cash, maybe he wasn't. Maybe the people he had to pay for the use of the airport and security were inflating their price. There's no way to know for sure. Finally, Stephen gave in. They agreed on a price of $20,000. The money was transferred to a Ximan Xeeb administration account. T.I. assures Stephen it's not his personal account. He's not a dictator. The ransom and rescue operation is set for June 17th. The pilot will take off from Nairobi at dawn with a leather bag containing 5 bundles of $100 bills, $440,000 in total. There's one last glitch, which is that the pilot refuses to actually touch down in Adado. because...
Well, he didn't want to be caught by pirates.
So instead, he'll fly very low to the ground, and 2 security guys on board will chuck the ransom out the window into the pirate's hands. A guy called Ali. He's the pirate Stephen has been negotiating with for months. The pilot will know where Ali is because, and I'm not joking here, he will mark the spot with an X on the roof of his car. Now, T.I. had told Stephen he would supply 100 policemen to provide security at the airport. But when the pilot got into Adato's airspace, all he saw was one lonely car with an X on its roof, parked off the end of the runway. The pilot was already on the phone with Stephen, so Stephen called T.I. and said,
"Where are your men?" And so suddenly another vehicle appeared from the town. The pilot said, "Oh, yes, I can see a pickup coming from the town now with a couple of men in the back."
Oh, my God. So his 100 security men and 5 armored cars turned out to be...
Two men.
Pickup truck and 2 guys.
Pickup truck driver and 2 guys in the back.
And who were late.
The pilot did one low pass, and then on the second, they threw the ransom out the window. Ali called Stephen a few minutes later to confirm he had the money. The pirates were supposed to spend the next few hours counting it, and then once they confirmed it was all there, they would hand Rachel and Paul over.
So what happened?
So it all went quiet. And that worried us a little. We did have suspicions even that night. We thought, this doesn't sound good. And we did try ringing Ali, but his phone was turned off that night.
He didn't hear from Ali again for 2 days. And then Stephen got a text demanding another $1 million in ransom. Eventually, Stephen got Ali on the phone. Ali's gone full Blackbeard, and Stephen's stiff upper lip is gone. He tries threats. Ali mocks him. Here's that call.
"We will tell all the ship bosses that the Somali pirates cannot be trusted. That you, Ali, cannot be trusted. I will talk to them now. And
You don't know that the piracy are all thieves. You know, all of us are all thieves. We are all gangy people."
Ali says, "Don't you know that pirates are all thieves? We're all dirty people. Like, come on, Stephen. What did you expect?" Ali laughs at him.
"You're lying, cheating scum, Ali. The ship owners will never, ever trust you again. When you're ready to talk the release of Rachel and Paul, call me. You have my number. You can call me this time between 11 and 12 o'clock your time. I will only talk about the release of Rachel and Paul. Bye."
No, and I will talk about the money.
The pirates didn't release Rachel and Paul for another 5 months. Fast forward to now. The UN and the Belgians and Stephen Collette say that those phone calls, where T.I. is demanding money of Stephen, that's extortion. He's refusing to let Stephen use the Adato airport unless Stephen pays him an amount that far exceeds the normal cost for use of the airport. And they say this is part of a pattern with T.I., that he did this in at least 3 other hostage cases, up to $120,000 in one case. T.I. says he's innocent of all charges of wrongdoing. But 2 months after we started talking, I heard all those recordings of his phone calls, and I realized that some of the things he told me weren't true. For instance, we were talking about the plan for Rachel and Paul's release, and he told me,
No, there's no cost whatsoever.
He says there's no cost whatsoever. That's not what I heard on that phone call with Stephen.
You're saying you didn't ask him for any money?
No, I never asked him money.
Okay, I think we can clear this up. I want to play something for you.
So all the fees and everything, the fee is gonna come $21,750.
I played him that phone call you heard. At first, he sounded confused. He stuck with his denial.
Stephen Collette, he called me, but I never asked him for money.
Well, you just heard yourself, right? Ask him for money in that tape I just played you.
No, I understand very clearly.
T.I. told me the $21,750 was money the airport owners were demanding, not him.
But T.I., you can see how this would look like extortion.
In a way, yes, I can. It looks like extortion, but it wasn't extortion. It's a reality.
How is it not
We
extortion?
don't have that much money to pay.
But explain how it's not extortion.
Okay, I didn't have... Yes, to him, it's extortion. I understand. That's what I'm saying. But to me, at that time, I didn't have that much money to cover.
Meaning his administration couldn't cover the expenses. And the fact that no security was on duty when the pilot dropped the ransom? T.I. explained that when he learned the pilot wasn't going to land the plane, he decided there was no reason to send police that day. But he says he used Stephen's money 5 months later, when Rachel and Paul were finally released. And in a book Rachel and Paul wrote about their ordeal, they do describe driving to the airport with T.I. in a convoy of 15 Toyotas and 3 or 4 trucks mounted with guns. We had to hang up before we were done talking about this. The next time I reached him was 2 days later.
Let me go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is... I never discussed anyone before this one, what I'm saying now.
Okay.
Except you. First, I call the airport committee, and I told them that this is what's going on. This is what's going to happen.
T.I. tells me he asked the owners of the airport to let Rachel and Paul use it for free as a humanitarian gesture. But they said no. They said, we built an airport, we get to charge people to use it. So then T.I. says he went to the regional parliament and asked them to step in. I wasn't able to confirm any of this, by the way. He says they also said no. His hands were tied. He had to ask for the $21,750. He said actually the airport owners weren't making much profit for themselves at that price. Regardless, $21,750 is the number he now admits he demanded from Stephen.
Actually, he didn't like it.
No.
And clearly, to be honest with you, I knew that because if I wear his shoes, it's gonna be saying will pissed off and feel betrayed, lie to me or something.
Yeah.
But I explained to him again and again, and then.
But the way you explain it to him, it sounds very much as though you're telling him, I'm in charge of the airport, and I talked to my committee and we assessed that it's going to cost you this much. You don't explain it to him the way that you just explained it to me, which is, in the way you just explained it to me, you're not responsible for any of the cost.
But Jana, I didn't want to explain the way I explained to you.
How come?
I didn't want to show him that I was kind of weak. In a way, it shows me that I was weak, and I didn't want to show that. And I'm telling you that I never discussed anyone before, except you now. The details.
What were you worried about? Why were you worried about looking weak to Stephen?
Because what I'm saying is, if Stephen find out that this is I don't have control anything, then he will find out that I don't have a control on what I'm saying, and I'm the man who says that, hey, I control Ximan Xeeb. In a way, yes, I control Ximan Xeeb. I didn't lie about that. Mm-hmm. But I don't control certain areas, and there is a certain elements that I have no authority whatsoever.
T.I. told me he was worried that if Stephen or the pirates realized he didn't have as much control over the airport as they thought he did, that the deal would fall apart and Rachel and Paul would remain in captivity. So he swallowed a bitter pill and demanded the money from Stephen.
I was pissed off. Yes, of course. I lost that war, but I knew I'm going to win another war. I was feeling very complicated, and I was feeling very, in a way, yes, I'm doing something positive, and in a way that I was doing something horrible, and I'm the one who's delivering the message both sides.
He was doing something positive, helping to free Rachel and Paul, and he was doing something horrible, demanding money from Rachel's desperate brother.
There's a lot of things I regret I should do differently, but my intention was very good, and I never been a pirate in my life. And if I did some wrong, or if I did something stupid, or something that some other person don't like it, I'm sorry, but my intention was good. That's what I'm saying. And I don't know how to explain other than that.
Somali pirates were once just Somali fishermen. But then in the 90s, during the Civil War, when there was no longer a government, they watched foreign boats sail into their waters, scoop up their fish, and leave unpunished. So they decided to do something about it. Initially, the fishermen just wanted to scare the illegal boats away. But then some of them started charging those boats a fine. Fines turned into ransoms, and Somali piracy was born. In a semi-lawless state like Somalia, without a functioning government, everything is up for rationalization. One man's fine is another man's ransom. Or in T.I.'s case, one man's airport fee is another man's extortion. I think it's possible that T.I. sincerely believes he was doing the right thing. I ran all this past a former U.S. diplomat who worked in Somalia and has followed it closely for years. She didn't want me to use her name, but she dealt with T.I. when he was in Adado, and she's worked with lots of people in Somalia like T.I., people who spent years in the U.S. and then returned to work in Somalia. She says people like T.I. who've lived outside Somalia for years, they often have a hard time when they return. She called them in-between people. They come of age living in the U.S., learn how the country runs here, and then they go back. And they can't play the U.S. game 100%, but they also can't play the Somali game 100%. And they get in trouble. She said T.I. probably went to Ximan Xeeb with the best of intentions. But she said, quote, with no finances to support government functions and one of the most dangerous security situations anywhere in the world, T.I. and others have been drawn into that murky place where they believe that they have no choice but to find accommodations with those who are engaged in corrupt or criminal practices. With their Western backgrounds, they can't claim that they don't understand what constitutes criminal behavior. She told me T.I. meddled in too many things he should have stayed out of, and he wasn't savvy enough to protect himself, to add layers of deniability, have someone else handle those phone negotiations, put some distance between himself and the criminals. Not that she was advocating these things, for him or anyone else, and she wanted me to make clear that she does not condone piracy. But that was her theory. I put this to T.I. He agreed that he should have protected himself better.
That is what basically the moral of what happened to me. So I learned my lesson, which is that you have to protect yourself, whatever it takes.
Do you think you were a little naive?
Yes, I was. That's what I said, right? I said I was naive. I carried away because I didn't think about the consequence. Or I thought we are in perfect world that everybody was helping, and so that's why, I was naive.
T.I.'s case is on appeal right now. The piracy charges were dropped for lack of evidence, but he was convicted of being involved in a criminal organization of pirates. If he loses the appeal, he could spend the next 6 years in prison. If he wins, he could get out in June. Once he's out, he says he'll go back to Minneapolis, take a pause, be with his kids. But after that, he might return to Somalia and run for president.
Dana Chivas. She works on our program and on the Serial podcast.